Before our ceremony begins today, Miss Anne Marie Sullivan will start by performing God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to the retirement ceremony for Commander Dan Turbeville, culminating 26 years of service in the United States Navy. Friends, family, please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem and the invocation. Bosun, post the side boys. Captain, United States Navy, arriving. Commander Dan Turbeville, United States Navy, arriving. The colors today will be presented by Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, Color Guard. Our national anthem will be sung by Miss Anne Marie Sullivan. Color Guard, parade the colors. Salute.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Ready? 2. NPTU Chaplain Lieutenant Sean Redmond will now deliver the invocation.
Please join me in prayer. Let us pray. Almighty God, as we gather here on this revered warship that has so many stories to tell about so many sailors who served and sacrificed on her deck plates, we ask for your presence to be upon us as we celebrate the remarkable career of the esteemed sailor retiring on her deck plates today, Commander Dan Turbeville. As Dan sheds the cherished naval uniform he has worn for more than half of his life, let his heart be filled with wonderful memories from the last 26 years and great anticipation for what the next 26 years and beyond will bring. Whatever Dan chooses to do in civilian life, may he always operate with the same unreserved empathy, unwavering temperance, and quiet professionalism that made him a beloved mentor, leader, and friend to all of whom had the privilege of serving under him and alongside him. Most importantly, God, as we begin today's celebration, may you also fill the hearts of those who Dan loves most, Mary, Charlie, and Sam, with the purest joy, as their father and husband's heart will no longer be divided between love of country and love of family. From this day on, Dan's heart is unconditionally theirs. It's with happy and grateful hearts we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Military guests may uncover. Bosun, retire the side boys. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce NPTU Charleston Commanding Officer, Captain Reed Kep. Captain Kep will now present Dan with his retirement award. Military members, attention to award. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Meritorious Service Medal, Gold Star, in lieu of third award to Commander Daniel W. Turbeville, United States Navy, for service as set forth in the following citation. For outstanding meritorious service while serving as Executive Officer, Naval Nuclear Power Training Unit Charleston from May 2020 to April 2023. Demonstrating impressive leadership, commitment to excellence, and superb management ability, Commander Turbeville drove one of the Navy's premier nuclear training commands to accomplish unprecedented achievements in maintenance, training, and operations. Under his guidance and direction, more than 1,400 officers, civilian engineering officers of the watch, and over 4,500 enlisted nuclear operators were certified for fleet operations. By his exceptional professionalism, initiative, and loyal dedication to duty, Commander Turbeville reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. For the President, J.F. Caldwell, Jr., Admiral, United States Navy. Please be seated. Ms. Caitlin Fossen, a friend of Mary and Dan's from Seattle during their tour on Ingraham, and wife of Commander Ed Fossen, who served on Ingraham with Dan, will now recite an original poem on what it means to be a Navy wife.
What will become of us, we wondered when we were young. What kind of life will we choose? Then we discovered that what came to be was not of our choosing, but we believed in love, so we embraced it. We did our best to be brave when facing uncertainty, to be strong when times were hard, and to be honorable in the commitments that we made. And we learned quickly that bravery is about being scared and doing it anyway, that strength is built one day at a time, and that honor is alive in the heart of anyone who does what's best for someone else. By this, we came to know that life isn't chosen, it's made. She knows it too, because she is one of us, a military spouse, a rare breed that is undyingly supportive, yet fiercely independent. We constantly find ourselves in new places, in the Pacific Northwest, where the snow-capped mountains stand guard over the sea, in Southern California, where the cacti bloom in the desert night, in the low country, where the smell of pluff mud seeps into the soul. We stay long enough for those places to feel like home. They become our home, and then we move on. But they remain with us, these places, the challenges we faced, and the people who walked beside us. They all became part of who we are, not because of the life we chose, but because of who we chose to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's presiding officer and guest speaker for today's ceremony is Captain Vic Garza. Vic will now present the Turbeville family with certificates of appreciation and support. Certificates are presented to Dan's parents, Gwen and Les Turbeville. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Ushers, please escort Mary, Charlie, and Sam to the stage. A certificate of appreciation from the United States Navy to Miss Mary Schmidt Turbeville. And today, after completing 26 years of active naval service, your husband has ended in honorable and faithful service to his country, and his efforts are sincerely appreciated. Your loyalty and dedication were significant sources of strength for your husband during arduous duty and exemplified the highest traditions of patriotism. On behalf of the Department of the Navy and the officers and crew of NPTU Charleston, I extend you a sincere thank you and express our appreciation for a job well done. Signed, GR Captain, United States Navy. And Charlie and Sam, by the authority vested in me, it is my pleasure to express to you grateful appreciation of the United States Navy for your unselfish, patriotic, and devoted service during your father's military career. With his service to the Navy now complete, he will be able to spend more time with you in the future. The United States Navy and I thank you and wish you and your family all the best in your future endeavors. Signed, G.R. Kep, Captain, United States Navy. Dan, before we get into the remarks, there is one more gift or presentation from you from the petty officer, the Chief's best.
So from the Chief Petty Officers Association, we just want to say thank you for your great support of the Chief's Mess while you're here. And personally, I would just like to say it was an honor working beside you, and you will be missed. So we got you. I guess you want to see it.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Captain Vic Garza. Vic and Dan met each other serving as division officers on the USS Enterprise.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Wes, for that intro. I got to tell you, it's a great honor to be here. Celebrate a career in the Navy from Dan and the Dan's family as well. To honor you, something new for me, I gotta say. But what a pleasure. Proud to highlight the positive impact that you've had on me and most of us here in this room across the Navy in service of our nation. So it's great to be here. Now, Gwen and Les, I want to tell you, you raised a fine young man. And quite honestly, all three of your children, Melissa, Wes, Dan, fantastic parents. Good job to you. Thank you for bringing him to us. Right? You delivered him to the Naval Academy all those years ago. I think a fine young boy, and now we'll celebrate what he's become. Now, Dan started off his Navy career on the Mobile Bay. Mobile Bay was then out in Japan, so he cut his teeth driving in a pretty high, dense traffic, a lot of stress, and a lot of adventures, I think, ashore, which also influenced my career later, as he convinced me to follow him out to Japan, although I didn't know he wouldn't be there when I got there. After the Mobile Bay, he came to Power School and Prototype and began his nuclear life. It's just interesting that he begins his nuclear life and then ends his career back here in Charleston. What a great place. Then the Big E, right? The Enterprise. So this is where I first met Dan. And I think my first encounter with him was there's a lieutenant assigned to shepherd those of us who are not qualified. And as I'm going through quals, this lieutenant says to me, "You should go stand in under instruction watch with Lieutenant Turbeville." They call him Turbo because he's really cool. People like him. And I was a little like, that's not usually what you do. You usually don't go up to the cool person and say, "Hey, can I be your friend?" Right? I was like, I don't think I should do that. He said, "You should go stand a UI with Dan Turbeville." I said, "Okay." And as those of you who are qualified watchstanders know how hectic the watch could be, and those of you who are unqualified probably have more, familiarity with the experience that I did. And I walked and I asked permission to enter and stationed myself as UI, and Dan was doing something over here, and he looks over, he's like, "No, go away," right? And there I was, crushed by the cool Turbeville. And what's interesting is it didn't stop there, okay? So, Ensign Garza, as many of us who are ensigns know, didn't understand a lot about the Navy. And so we had this general quarters drill, and I'm in this unit locker with my sailors, and we're trying to get whatever we're doing done, and I guess the drill's not going because we're back in the unit locker, and this Chief Petty Officer Select comes and talks to us. Again, I didn't know what that meant, okay? So forgive me, those of you wearing the anchors. I didn't know what that meant at that time. I was an ensign. And the Chief Petty Officer Select says, "Sir, you are cordially invited to training on the mess decks." And I looked at him, and I looked at the sailors, and I said, "Well, what do you think, fellas? You know, should we go? We've been cordially invited." And unanimously, they all said no. I said, "Well, thank you. Well, we declined the invitation." And I thought I was, doing that leadership thing. And then there's a certain way that somebody enters the room with gravitas. And we're sitting there, and we're chewing the fat, and the door slams open, and in walks this presence that is Turbo Dan. And without a cue, all the sailors abandoned me. And they just ran around him like they didn't see him. And now it was just Dan and me. And he's looking at me, not happy. And I now realize at this moment what cordially invited means in the Navy. And I looked at him and I was like, "I'm sorry, sir." And he's like, "Get your ass on the mess decks." And that was my first Navy dressing down from this man. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. Dan's commitment to damage control. A little bit later, a couple months on deployment, now the Enterprise is hot. It's a hot ship, steam's everywhere in the plant where it's supposed to be, but it's also radiating heat. And we did a general quarters drill, and the air conditioning gets turned off, and we're all hot and sweaty, and the drill is over, and we're securing from the drill. And I'm walking back from my grand position of unit locker, and the locker officer, Lieutenant Turbeville, is sitting there looking at the damage control plates. And he has that dimple in his face, and he's looking over the drill as it went. And I just stopped and watched him and took it in, and there he is. He's just standing there looking. He's going through, and then he gets to the end, and he says, "Yep, save the ship again." And I said, "That's who I want to be right there. That's the man. That's the officer that I want to be like." Okay, so one other point of influence that Dan Turbeville gave to me as a young junior officer. I was writing a report that was going to go to the captain. It was my first time writing this report. Of course, it's a big deal to me. And I look over at Dan, I was like, "How should I write this?" And Dan holds up a napkin, and he says, "Vic, you could turn your report in on this napkin, and everything would be just fine." So I want to tell you, Dan, your influence is still with me today as I write in my remarks on a napkin just for you, my friend. Okay, so then came the day that Dan Turbeville had to leave the Enterprise, as we all leave command from time to time, and I looked at him and I said, "The ship is not going to be the same without you." And I was right. And Dan was off to the Air Force Academy. It wasn't enough for him to influence the young officers and sailors of the Navy. We had to send them to the Air Force Academy where he could also influence their next generation of officers. Followed that, Dan goes to department head school in Newport. Now, our friend Mike Woolner, who's in the crowd today, gave me a piece of advice. He said, in the Navy, you meet people that you'll remember your whole life. And at the time, he says, "I live 3 hours away from people I went to high school with, and I haven't seen them in a year, and yet I'll drive 300 miles to go visit some of my Navy friends." And now Dan is one of those Navy friends, so I fly across country to go meet him. In Newport in the winter is the best time to go, right? So I go and I visit him, and he picks me up, and he has that Dan Turbeville smile. The dimple is shining bright, and we start with the pleasantries. "How's it going?" And we get the stuff into his truck, and he looks at me. He's like, "I got to tell you something, Vic." He said, "I met a girl." And I said, "That's great. When do I get to meet her?" And he looks at me. He's like, "I don't know if she's quite ready to meet you yet, Vic." And I can see why he said that, Mary. From the beginning, you were someone special. A little bit later after that, Dan and I go to Mike Woolner's wedding. He was my date, okay? And I expected Dan Turbeville to be there and us to have all that male bonding that I missed. And all he could do was talk about you. And there was all couples. Everybody was a couple, and he was my couple. And Mike had this beautiful picture of the wedding party, and they're all on the bridge, and there's Dan and I in the creek, looking like the trolls, right? And he's talking to me about this wonderful person that he's met in his life. And I'll tell you, to your parents, they also did a fine job of raising you. And the story that I remember, and if the facts are wrong, that's not important, but I was in San Diego, and Dan was in San Diego, and Dan and Mary are getting married. And I didn't know that, but Mary comes down and to tell me in person. So they take me out to this nice, it's winter again, this nice waterfront restaurant in San Diego. It's such a romantic experience for the three of us. And Mary says to me, we're getting married, and you can't come to the wedding. And I was like, I thought we were through this, Dan. But the truth is, I was going to be out on deployment. What a class act to come down and tell me that you were marrying the person I also loved, and I know you love him very deeply. And quite honestly, he made the right choice. I think it's very clear. And now, so to Hank and Kate, fantastic job. What a class act you have raised in your young daughter. And you began your life together at that point. And then shortly thereafter, I should say shortly in Navy time, which equals a few years, came Charlie. And man, did Dan's life change. I think the stories that I started hearing from him were, for those of you who have children, there is nothing like that first child to just really shake your experience and hear that from Dan, that this person that was once a boy that I served with is now a man and an adult and a father. And your life together, I think, has been tremendous. I've really appreciated continuing to be a part of your life as well, Mary. So Dan left, I think, so on those two sea tours, and I saw a couple Ingraham shipmates. I think, Elaine, I see you here now. I don't know what happened. They didn't ring the bells for you. But it's good to see you. And I just met another Ingraham sailor here tonight. It was just this morning. And then after the Ingraham, he goes to the Lincoln, where he's the reactor training assistant. And again, shepherds all those new officers through their life. And then the next sea tour after the Lincoln was the Eisenhower, and I'm pretty motivated to hear that Dan continued his damage control efforts on the Eisenhower, as far as I'm concerned, is the best damage control assistant ever, and would routinely go onto the 1MC and recognize sailors for being the ship saver. You know, you save the ship again. Now, Dan, you're here in Charleston at the end of your Navy career, and I started by saying, you know, how you performed an impact in the Navy, and then I proceeded to tell everyone that the impact you've had on me. And you know what, Dan, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. There's a lot of people in this Navy I think that you have impacted as much or more than me. And as the Navy gives you back to your family, and in earnest, as a man, as a father, and an outstanding human being, I look forward to being part of your next chapter of your wonderful life and how you continue to influence those around you and how they will be better because of knowing you. It's been an absolute honor knowing you, Dan. Pleasure serving with you. And that concludes my remarks. Now, before I bring up the man of the hour, I'd like you all to stand up for me for a second. And we're going to do something a little differently. I tried to find out who the rock star of the day is shortly before, but I'm dated. So those of you who are my age, you know, boys, new kids on the block, boys to men, right? You got to imagine the presence that Dan Turbeville is. He is that level of rock star, and I'd like you to welcome him here to talk to you with that level of enthusiasm. Can you give it to me? I want to hear it.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thanks, Vic, for those words. For those of you that don't know, Vic just turned over, had his change of command of USS Cowpens last Friday in San Diego, and he's going to be going out and assuming command of USS Antietam in Japan here in a little bit. I think he's on his 6th or 7th year of sea duty between his command tours and his RO tour. And he and Maya have 4 small kids at home. So when I asked him to be my retiring officer, I was hedging my bets that he wouldn't be able to come. And
I thought I could check that box, make him feel good about himself, and then I could move on and find another guest speaker I really wanted. But then he surprised me by saying yes, and I should have known he'd show up. Right, Vic's the type of friend. He once helped me push down my broken down Harley Davidson. He helped me push it about 2 miles down Greenbrier Parkway in Chesapeake in the middle of a rainstorm to get it home. So thanks for being here today, Vic. I also want to thank everyone for coming here today. Right, I know May's a busy time, especially those with kids. You know, the end of school, college, Mother's Day. So I really appreciate y'all making the time to be here today. A few words for the NPTU team, both the Navy and the NNL side. I want to thank y'all for making my Twilight tour very rewarding and fulfilling. Right, it's challenging duty here at NPTU, but I often think about the fact that this is the only place in the world where we're doing this type of training and this type of work. And the secret to that success is the people here. Right, I'm really grateful to have worked with a great group of people during this tour, the department heads, you know, the senior enlisted, the MTS triads, and a couple groups that I worked with pretty closely on a day-to-day basis. I just want to recognize. So the executive team, you know, Master Chief Leftwich, Site Materials Group, A.O. Mummert, the Yeoman, L&C Amerson, and a special thanks to Captain Kep, CMC Montello, and CMC Duran, right, for your mentorship and guidance during this tour. So I wrote a speech about my favorite memories and moments during my Navy time, but it was running about 45 or 50 minutes. So I decided I'd use a top 10 list today to kind of shorten it down a bit. Right, I know my boys are already tired of hearing me talk, and they're actually already eating lunch. They get hangry for lunch about 10:30. So here are my top 10 highlights. So number 10, Naval Academy, class of 97, 4th Company. Yeah. So we were lucky to do all 4 years in the same company with the same group of folks. So just thinking about those stories, you know, 26 years later makes me laugh out loud. So Hal, Steve, Luke, Eric, Kyle, Dave, you know, thank you all for being here today and being a part of this. I couldn't have asked for a greater group of friends to start my Navy time with and to finish my Navy time with, so thank you. So number 9, Big E, the Enterprise, right? What a great tour that was, and it was another great group of friends that I made. So Vic, my roommates Mike Woolner, Mark Harris, and Mark Yates, who I'm pretty sure signed 97% of my qual card when I qualified watch officer. So, right, we had a dream deployment. We spent most of the summer in the Med cruising around, Great Liberty, and we were headed home when 9/11 happened. And we turned right back around immediately, and a couple days later, we commenced some of the first flight ops or airstrikes into Afghanistan. So being on Enterprise for that deployment and part of that initial response is something I'll always be proud of. So number 8, being Lieutenant Dan, best rank in the Navy. Yeah, right. So I love being Lieutenant Dan. My one piece of advice today to the JOs and the lieutenants, when I put on lieutenant, one of my mentors told me, they're like, no more excuses, lieutenants run the Navy. And I believe that, but you got to make sure you're having fun while you're doing it. And it is possible, right? If you just ask some of the Big E folks here today, if you ask the Ingraham crew here today, the men and women, right, they mastered it, doing a great job and having fun. So there are many days where I absolutely wish I was Lieutenant Dan again. But not today. I'm pretty happy to be Commander Dan retiring. So, yeah. So number 7, the USS Ingraham, the last and the finest, the mighty ham as we called her. Right. So for my first department head tour, I asked for a DDG out of Pearl, and I got a frigate out of Everett. But that turned out to be one of my favorite tours. Again, it was a one-of-a-kind deployment, a great mix of liberty. We spent Christmas in Australia, and we did some real-world operations, hunting pirates and things like that. The divos were a ton of fun. So Tim, Alan, Ed, Windsor, didn't quite make it today. Enjoyed serving with y'all. I made some great department head friends. Emily and I ended up doing both of our department heads tour together, gutting through those. And it was a really sad day for me when they sank the Ham as a target for a SINC-X a couple years ago. So, number 6, working with the Navy's senior enlisted, the chiefs, the senior chiefs, the master chiefs is one of the things I've enjoyed during my career. A highlight of this tour is serving again with some of those sailors whom I served with previously and deployed with on ships and got to see them again. All right, so Master Chief Sprankle, Master Chief Krause, Master Chief Kiambo, Senior Browning, Senior Serbu, and several others. Right, and in some cases, like Master Chief Price and Master Chief Wittig, I got to serve with them first as petty officers. I think they were first-class petty officers, and then I got to see them later again as Master Chiefs, which has been a true honor. All right, so from my first crusty gunner's mate chief as a Divo to the NPTU Master Chief Mafia, right, they've had a large influence on the leader and person I am today. Right, without them, I would never get a haircut or take my hands out of my pockets. So thank you for that. So, all kidding aside, I have the highest respect for our Navy senior enlisted leaders. All right, so number 5, the variety of assignments. Looking back, I was either always on a ship, fixing ships as a maintenance coordinator, or at a training command, training officers and enlisted. And I realized that was my calling in life. It was what I was meant to do, so I'm really thankful for those opportunities to kind of, pay it forward and shape the next generation of sailors. Right? I've been lucky in my career to serve under SWOs, aviators, submariners, Captain Kep, Captain Mongold, and even got to serve under some Marine Corps Colonel commanding officers, Colonel Streeter, Colonel Coggins, right? So I want to thank everybody for all your lessons in leadership and trusting me with great responsibilities. And yes, it is true, I even boondoggled an exchange tour at the Air Force Academy where I taught a couple math classes in between skiing and earning my Air Force jump wings. So really enjoyed all my assignments. Number 4, my roommates, right? Roommates and friends along the way. So I've got a couple friends here, Matt and Paul. I've known those guys since I was growing up here in Midlothian, Virginia, long before I joined the Navy. And then the roommates I've had along the way, Corey, I saw Corey somewhere, Corey, Paul again, Dave, Hal and Sue, I crashed with them a couple times. So many good memories, and then also good Navy friends like Todd and Kelly Funk. I'll always remember, how they treated me like family and always opened their home to me, and provided me a place to hang out and a place to stay. So many good memories, right? Never a dull moment. So please, if I can ever return the favor, anybody needs a place to stay, please let me know. We've built a pretty nice tree house, and I'll let you use that for low country glamping. So yeah. So number 3, support of my family through the years. Mom, Dad, Melissa, Wes. Thanks for all the support, the letters, the emails, the care packages, helping with the moves, hanging on to all my stuff all these years. Right, I wouldn't be surprised if after the ceremony my mom actually gives me another bag of stuff that she's been holding on to, waiting for the opportunity to give it back to me. All right, and I've enjoyed serving with Wes and Paige. Thanks for making this the Navy our family business. All right, number 2, Charlie and Sam. Right, I love you guys. Of all the professional achievements and cool things I've done during the past 26 years, being your father is what I'm most proud of and consider my greatest accomplishment. And I'm looking forward to spending even more time with you guys and continuing to raise you with your mom. All right, so number 1, picking up Mary at the Pelham, right? So, yeah. So we met one night at the Pelham in Newport when I was at department head school, which you SWOs know, the Pelham in Newport is a very special place where I met my special girl. And that's where the adventure began. So 4 ships, 4 deployments, 7 moves, and 5 jobs later for Mary, here we are today. All right, so thank you for being there by my side through the good times and through the tough times. I couldn't have done it without you. All right, the running joke is, in our 18 years together, Mary has only called me at work 3 times. And one of those times, she accidentally dialed and called Admiral Ruth, who was on his import cabin on the Nimitz at the time. But luckily, he knew her when he was our XO on Abraham Lincoln, So the Admiral was happy to transfer Mary's call down to my office. But what that really says is how strong Mary has been through the years, about taking care of our family, right? You know, I was often sad about leaving and getting underway and going on deployments, right? But I never worried about leaving the family behind, right? I always knew Mary was tough, strong, and loving. I knew she was someone that could take care of whatever came up, and she'd be able to take care of everyone in my absence. So knowing that Mary was the rock and foundation back home allowed me to give 100%, right, to being the best naval officer I could be and taking care of the sailors that I was entrusted to lead. So thank you, Mary, for being my support and making me a better officer, a better leader, and a better person. I can't wait to start the next adventure. Okay, I think that's all I've got. Again, I'm truly honored and humbled. Everybody came here today to celebrate my retirement. All right, I thank you all for being a big part of my successful naval career, and I thank you for being a bigger part of my blessed life. So, thank you.
Dan will now be presented with the flag of the United States of America. Flag detail, post. Each Navy Day begins with the ceremony of hoisting colors at 0800 and ends with the lowering of the colors at dusk. Dan has lived under its fold for his entire 26-year naval career. Each salute of the colors will remind him of the freedom that he helped to defend. Master Chief Herb Sprankle will now read Old Glory.
I am the flag of the United States of America. My name is Old Glory. I fly atop the world's tallest buildings. I stand watch in America's halls of justice. I stand guard majestically over great institutions of learning. I stand guard with the greatest military power in the world. Look up and see me. I stand for peace, truth, honor, and justice. I stand for freedom. I am confident. I am arrogant. I am proud. When I am flown with my fellow banners, my head is a little higher. My colors a little truer. I bow to no one. I am recognized all over the world. I am worshipped. I am saluted. I am respected. I am revered. I am loved and I am feared. I have fought in every battle of every war for more than 200 years. Gettysburg, Shiloh, Appomattox, San Juan Hill, the trenches of France, Argonne Forest, Anzio, Rome, the beaches of Normandy, the jungles of Guam, Okinawa, Tarawa, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, and a score of places long forgotten by all those who were there with me. I was there. I led my sailors and Marines. I followed them and watched over them. They loved me. I was on a small hill in Iwo Jima. I was battle-worn and tired, but my sailors and Marines cheered me. I was proud. I was at Ground Zero in New York City on September 11th as cowardly fanatics attacked America. I was raised from the ashes of once proud buildings by brave firefighters, heroes, who risked their lives to save others, showing all that America, although bloody, will never be beat. Those who will destroy me cannot win. For I am the symbol of freedom, of one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. I have been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of my own country. And when it is done by those whom I have served in battle, it hurts. But I shall overcome, for I am strong. I have slipped the bonds of earth, and from my vantage point on the moon, I stand watch over the uncharted new frontiers of space. I have been a silent witness to all of America's finest hours. But my finest hour comes when I am torn in strips to be used as bandages for my wounded comrades on the field of battle, when I fly at half-mast to honor my wounded comrade soldiers, my sailors, my airmen, my Marines, when I lie in the trembling arms of a grieving mother at the graveside of her fallen son or daughter. I am proud. My name is Old Glory. Long may I wave, dear God. My God, long may I wave.
Detail, post. Lieutenant Abby Kaiser will now recite the watch.
The watch. For over 26 years, this sailor has stood the watch. While some of us were in our bunks at night, this sailor stood the watch. While some of us were in school learning our trade, this shipmate stood the watch. Yes, even before some of us were born into this world, this shipmate stood the watch. In those years when the storm clouds of war were seen brewing on the horizon of history, this shipmate stood the watch. Many times he would cast an eye ashore and see his family standing there, needing his guidance and help, needing that hand to hold during those hard times, but he still stood the watch. He stood the watch for over 26 years. He stood the watch so that we, our families, and our fellow countrymen could sleep soundly and safely, each and every night, knowing that a sailor stood the watch. Today we are here to say, shipmate, the watch stands relieved by those you have trained, guided, and led. Shipmate, you stand relieved. We have the watch.
Please rise as Lieutenant Sean Redmond will now deliver the benediction.
Please join me in prayer. Let us pray. Most gracious God, we thank you for granting us the opportunity to gather on this distinguished ship and honor the incredible career of Commander Dan Turbeville. We ask that you bless him with the faith, vision, and creativity needed to fulfill whatever you are calling him to do, to serve your people and to serve you in the civilian side of the world. As Dan walks down the brow today for the final time, may he find profound joy and solace in knowing he is leaving behind a rewarding and honorable legacy, and that his kind and compassionate presence will be dearly missed by all. May his and his family's journey from this point on be a smooth voyage full of nothing but fair winds and following seas, as they've most certainly earned that. And lastly, God, before we depart today's celebration, grant each of us the opportunity to personally thank Dan, Mary, Charlie, and little Sam for the unwavering service, commitment, and sacrifice they've afforded to us in the greater Navy. May your blessing and protection continually follow them for all the days of their lives. We pray these things in the utmost faith and trust. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Bosun, post the side buoys. Bosun, stand by to pipe the side, shipmate going ashore. Commander Dan Turbeville will now report to Captain Garza and request permission to lay ashore for the last time. Commander Dan Turbeville, United States Navy, retired, departing. It is customary for the retiree to be accompanied by their family as they go ashore for the final time. So Mary, Charlie, and Sam, if you please join Dan. United States Navy family, retired, departing. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the retirement ceremony for Dan. On behalf of Dan, his family, and the entire command, I'd like to thank you for attending.